Hey guys, so recently I brought the results of the ban list prediction survey, which is basically your thoughts in terms of what you think will get hit on the next ban list. But this time around, it's actually going to be my own predictions for this video. And so you can certainly go check out that survey video if you haven't already done so. And also I want to highlight that I recently partnered up with Trading Card Mint. So you can certainly use code Hakuna7 to get 7% off on Yu-Gi-Oh! Singles and sealed product. They have a lot of good stock and everything, so definitely go check that out. Anyways, let's just get right into this video. So I actually think, for the most part, this format is actually pretty good. Just because, you know, I don't think we actually need many archetype specific card hits, but rather just kind of curve around some of the more really powerful generic cards. So let's just get right into it. We're going to start off with the Anti-Spell Friends. This is a card that I think, myself included, a lot of people would want it banned, but realistically, you know, for one, it survived this far. Not that that's really a good reason, but, you know, like, it kind of matters in a sense. And so Anti-Spell, I don't think there actually will be a change this time around. It also, from a side deck perspective, if you watch kind of like my YCS top cut breakdowns of topping lists, Anti-Spell is not really that played, at least in terms of like all deck lists. Like usually you see this in Unchained a lot. Beatrice, though, on the other hand, I think we're gonna get to this a little bit later with some of the other hits. I actually do think this is a card that would get hit, just because, especially for one, like you have Transaction Rollback that's coming out in Phantom Nightmare or whatever in like early next year, and presumably if this ban list were to come out, my guess is after YCS in Italy in December, which means if we get it in December, we're probably not going to get another until like around March, and that means, you know, at that point Phantom Nightmare is legal at that point. And this card is really good, especially for like tier elements as well. It just kind of provides a guaranteed dump as well, and it's just a card that I think is something worthy of getting hit. Dragonic Diagram, honestly, I think this card can come back to 3. I like this card is not like it was good in its time for sure, like True King Dinos or True Draco. Neither of those decks that are seeing any form of competitive play at this point. I think it's totally fine, especially with, you know, maybe get some dinos a little bit more support if people even want to play that version at least. Another card, I think, it's kind of in the Unlimited Ancient Fairy Dragon. This kind of came to 1 recently, but realistically, I mean, there's some play, it's seen some play even now, I guess, but for the most part, it's not like that, like broken or anything anymore. So I think it's honestly fine, and no one would really care. And this is where I'm saying, you know, in terms of like archetype specific hits, I actually don't think we need anything. I think for now, like, even though yes, like Unchained, like Rescue Ace, like those decks are very strong, but I don't think they're really overly unfair, right? Like compared to some of the meta decks we've had in the past. So any archetype specific cards, I actually don't think we'll see any change this time around, but maybe for the future. Rescue Ace, technically it's been around for a little bit, but in terms of it being meta, it hasn't been that long, especially now with like the Sinful Spoil stuff. That's when it really took off, and that's still pretty recent in terms of Age of Overlord. Engage, so this is a funny one. I think there actually is a chance it can come to 3 at some point, but because of some of the recent Sky Striker support that's going to come down the pipeline that they've already announced, I think that's when they would actually put it at 3 if they're going to do it. Just not, you know, it's like kind of like how Gazelle came back after Soul Burning Volcano set was legal. It was kind of something you could predict for a while, even though Gazelle could have came back a lot earlier than that. But I think in terms of product release, they definitely take that into consideration clearly. So I think that's when they'll actually put Engage, but maybe not this one. D-Barrier. So I spoke about, you know, generic cards are the only ones that probably need to get hit for sure, at least this time around. And so this is definitely something that you know, I think we'll have to get hit. We kind of spoke a little bit earlier about transaction rollback. That's one of the things that, I mean, if they find a way to pitch this, I guess, yeah, sure. But nonetheless, I think it's a very, very strong card. And, you know, it's weird. Not that this card is cited in every deck or anything, not anymore. It's good against Pearly, but realistically, if you again see those YCS Hawkup breakdowns, it's not in every list, but it's still in a good chunk of them. The other thing is Konami clearly has shown that they kind of hit cards a lot after it was a really big problem, right? Like D-Barrier was actually worse, I find, in like the past summer where it saw even more play. Same with like Eradicator, for example. So I think, you know, this card is finally, hopefully, gets its time on the ban list now. Similar lines of Eradicator, but I don't think this one will actually get hit this time around because it's not actually seeing any form of play for the most part, realistically. Like, sure, I guess Labyrinth, just because they can tutor out, but we don't have like Hashir anymore, and they used to also side this as well. And so I think for now this card is safe, but another card for a potential candidate. Again, archetype specific cards, I mean, technically this is not Flunder specific in that essence. It's technically a Harpy card, but, you know, it pretty much is a Flunder card at this point. It's pretty toxic, but again, Flunder, they actually have not been doing that well from a YCS level perspective in the last month or so. They've definitely fallen off, so I think that's another reason why something like Featherstorm wouldn't actually get banned this time around. Cashier though, while it's a cashier card, it is still generic and it's seeing a lot of play in a lot of lists. Although admittedly, maybe in the recent while, maybe not as much, but still a card worth actually putting it at 1, just because it is incredibly strong at 3. And of course, if Pank is at 1, I think this card also arguably deserves to be at 1 as well. Shifter, this is probably the most controversial one. I do think, I think pretty much most people would think that this card should get banned. I understand some people will think that it's a necessary evil. I mean, I'm not confident in Konami to actually ban it right away. I think something janky like semi-limited, which isn't honestly that kind of a wild of a speculation, just because in like OCG they also put it at 2 at the beginning. I don't know about now. I'm not sure how Master Duel has hit it either, but I know those formats are technically different. But you know what? I think there's still a chance that they would at least kind of curve like the consistency of Shifter, which at this point I think I would gladly take this. It's been at 3 for far too longer than it should have, right? So hopefully it is kind of at least hit a little bit. So moving on to Dryden, and this one's kind of funny actually. Let's just start with Misk first. I actually think this could come to 2, and it's kind of funny because I actually thought this would come to at least 2 when Wild Survivors came out, because you had some Dino support coming out, the right same concept as like Gazelle and like Soul Burning Volcano. I thought that would be a perfect opportunity to bring Misk back to 2. I mean, it's had a little bit of regional success in terms of dinos. Definitely going through all those spreadsheets, I definitely remember seeing dinos every now and then, like finishing top 8 at some regional here and there. But nonetheless, it's definitely a far cry from what it used to be. I mean, of course, this card was put to 1, and then it came back to 3, and then it became like tier 1. Around I think 2020 actually, so it's been 3 years already, and then of course it got put to 1 back after it was like a tier 1 contender. So I think now of course for Dino I think it's fine to put Misk at 2 and like test that out again. I'm sure they're a little bit cautious with this one just because they've tried a couple times now, but I think at this point power creep, I think they can have this back to 2, and kind of in the way similar concept, except not really for Dryden, just because this one actually got straight up banned again, and I think at that point Konami is going to be even more cautious with this one compared to something like Misk, which at least they put it to 1 and it's still playable. But Dryden, realistically it can come back, I think, in my view, but I think for now they probably won't, just again being a little cautious there. Runic stuff, again, I wish it would get hit, draw multiple times each turn. Really not great. I mean, Konami typically has not been too fond of like too many draw cards, which is kind of funny how they actually brought back Engage. That was kind of like an exception, I think. So I think the Runic cards will again stay the same, only because if they're not hitting all the other decks. If they do hit like archetype specific cards in the tier 1 strategies, obviously you're gonna have to actually tone down Runic as well, because it's always like just like kind of creeping there as like a tier 2 option, and then can also come back to tier 1 contender again. Gimmick, this is of course seeing in Branded Despia. I do think this card actually does have to get banned, even though Branded Despia isn't actually, topping YCS anymore. Again, one aspect is, of course, if you ban D-Barrier, then that indirectly makes Branded stronger, although by how much, I'm not too sure, just because, Branded isn't, or rather D-Barrier isn't seeing that much play, and it's not in every side deck or anything. But nonetheless, again, another concept is just the fact that Konami seems to be pretty late when it comes to hitting, like, really problematic Floodgate cards like this, like, because, for example, like VFD, or even like Numeron Zexal, and even Scythe, like, let's not forget Curious, not that that was a Floodgate, but Curious and Scythe, like, they got banned like way after it was actually a really big problem. So that might partly be a reason as well, where they kind of get banned Gimmick. Realistically, they should have been banned like at least the last list prior. Zolde, this is another one that I know a lot of people are saying, oh, it should be banned, but realistically, again, I don't think we really need to have any archetype-specific hits right now. The format is honestly pretty good, so I think for now, Zolde is safe. I mean, realistically, there's been much worse times where Zolde was a bigger problem, and it still didn't get banned then. Maybe it does get banned in the future, but perhaps not now. Prosperity, this is another limited or generic card that I've been wanting to be put at least at 1 for a while. I actually think this card definitely needs to get banned at some point. I get it. I know a lot of people want this card around just to increase consistency, especially for those rogue deck enjoyers. I understand that, but this card is just far too good. While it's great for rogue decks, it makes tier 1 decks way too strong, because it's not just about consistency in terms of, like, tier 1 decks are already consistent enough, right? Like, it's just the fact that this digs into like post side cards that are really strong, like Anti-Spell Fragrance or D-Bearer, things like that, where it's just too good, and hopefully they actually put it to 1. They recently reprinted this, like, they got their money out of it, so hopefully they can actually do something about this card now. Skill Drain is another card that, you know, I don't know why I came back to 3. It should have stayed at 1 to begin with. But realistically, at this point, I don't think there's going to be any change for this one. Especially because if you see, like, the topping Labyrinth list, like, a lot of them aren't even playing Skill Drain anymore anyway. So you're not actually seeing that much of this card anymore compared to even just, like, earlier this year. And then again, I talk about the archetype-specific cards like Pearly. I don't think they're gonna hit. If they were to hit something, it probably would be Sleepy Memory, because again, it's like draw cards, and like they can draw up to like potentially like, you know, multiple times, like 3 times in like whatever draw standby phase, and then again with like Pearly. So that can be insane. Obviously, that's kind of like maximum scenario. Usually, like, you know, at least 2 though. So if they were to hit some of the archetype-specific cards, this would be it. But for now, I think this is safe. Especially, I don't actually know if Goblin's gonna be tier 1 or anything, but they are also coming in Phantom Nightmare, I believe, and they definitely have kind of like a advantage against something like Pearly, where they can just like detach opponents' Xyz monsters as well. Super Poly is another one. I don't think there's going to be any change this time around. This is definitely a card that's been up for debate whether, you know, it should be put back to 1, probably. But again, right now, I don't think there would be any change. Talents, though, is another generic card I think would actually get hit. At this point, it's just incredibly strong, like 3 banned cards in 1 essentially. Again, and in combination with like Ken and Jen nowadays as well, it just makes it like really, really, really busted. So this is a card that I do think will get hit, hopefully now, but at least at some point. Time Seal is another card. I mean, realistically, it's just put it to 3. I don't think anyone's going to care or play it. It'd be kind of funny, though, if it does come back, though, because it's certainly an old legacy card. The Shizu cards, especially the Millers, though, they are definitely worthy of getting banned. But it actually completely, I think, depends on what happens to D-Shifter. If this actually gets banned, then yes, I think the Shizu Shufflers, or rather, sorry, the Millers would also have to get banned as well. Mill 5, each of them is really, really strong. But assuming if Shifter were to only get semi-limited, I don't actually know if they would hit the Shizu cards on top of that as well, especially if, you know, for example, if Beatrice does get banned, which is one of the key components of Tier Elements as well, just because it provides like guaranteed dump to trigger whatever you need. So I think again, if Shifter does not see like a huge hit, then I don't think the Shizu Millers would get hit either. But if this does get banned, then these 2 cards I think also have to get hit. Another archetype specific card, Tour Guide. If you were to hit something like Unchained, this is one of the candidates as well. Again, I think this format is actually pretty decent. Like Unchained is a very, very strong deck, but I don't think it's like overly unfair though right now. So I think this card is still fine. The last card is Calamity. This one's interesting. On one hand, it definitely needs to get banned. Just not being able to activate or like just play in general is really not good, right? The only thing though is, as I mentioned earlier, cards like VFD, let's say Numerons Exile, they got banned a lot after when it should have been. Like Virtual World with VFD, like that went on for a couple months, and that was really, really bad. And Numerons Exile was also pretty toxic as well, but not nearly as, you know, dominant as it was with like VFD and Virtual World back then. So I do think hopefully it does get banned, but I actually think it might actually not have a change, especially because Centurion just came out, and this is kind of like their main gimmick right now. And that set, I mean, realistically, it's a pretty bad set, and that's kind of like the only selling point of Valiant Smashers. So I think, at least based on historical trends of, you know, these kind of floodgate cards just not being banned preemptively and just not that early, I do think we're gonna have to stick around and have to endure Calamity for a little bit. But hopefully it does actually get banned though, because, you know, obviously if you're banning Gimmick Puppet and Brand Despia, which is a deck that's not really you know, YCS level topping kind of deck anymore, you know, how would you not ban Calamity? But again, just kind of like that timing factor, I think you have to take into account of like Centurion and their recent release as well. So anyways, guys, that was it for my ban list predictions. Definitely look forward to hearing your thoughts. Honestly, whether you disagree or not, that's totally fine with me. I just want a ban list. I just want, like, it's always kind of exciting and refreshing, whatever change that we have. Although maybe not as much for the last one, because we only had like 3 card changes. Hopefully we get a little bit more changes this time around. But I am really looking forward to whatever change we're going to have in the next format. So anyways, thank you all for watching. Huge thanks to my patrons, as always, for the continued support. Definitely go check out those discount codes that I'll have in my video descriptions. And well, take care, guys.